The blizzard howled like a ravenous beast, but Alara no longer feared its bite. 3 days of exile had numbed her to everything but the certainty of her approaching death. Cast out by her own pack, by the golden-eyed alpha whose judgment had fallen like an executioner's blade, she had made peace with the endless white that would soon become her shroud. Funny how mercy could be the greatest crime. How saving 2 lost human children could be twisted into treason. How quickly a respected healer could become a marked outcast. The ceremonial wound on her side still seeping blood into her tattered clothes. The wind carried whispers that sounded almost like her mother's voice. Just breathe and be, little wolf. Just breathe and be. But breathing grew harder with each step. Being seemed a luxury reserved for those with packs, with purpose, with hope. Then she heard it. A whimper so faint it might have been imagination. A small black shape trembling in the snow, blood matting its fur, golden eyes that seemed to hold the last embers of a dying fire. Alara knelt, her frozen fingers reaching toward the wounded pup. Something stirred in her chest, a warmth she'd thought forever extinguished. She who had been abandoned would not abandon. She who had been left to die would offer life, never knowing that in this single act of compassion, the threads of fate were being rewoven, that the pup's golden eyes held secrets that would shatter everything she believed about strength, about forgiveness, about the alpha who had condemned her, and that when the full moon rose, the truth would transform them both. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The snow fell in thick, unforgiving sheets, burying the forest floor beneath layers of pristine white. Alara stumbled forward, each step more difficult than the last. Her breath came in ragged puffs of white vapor, disappearing into the swirling storm around her. 3 days without proper shelter. 3 days since her banishment. The wound on her side had stopped bleeding, but the pain remained, a constant reminder of her final moments among the pack she once called family. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, the words nearly lost in the howl of the wind. Just keep moving. But to where? The question haunted her with each faltering step. The neighboring packs would never take her in, not with the mark of exile burned into her skin. Humans would kill her on sight if they discovered what she was. There was nowhere to go, no safe haven waiting beyond the endless white. Her legs finally gave out, sending her crashing into the snow. The cold bit at her skin, seeping through her tattered clothes. Perhaps this was for the best. A quick end rather than days of slow starvation. She closed her eyes, feeling the snow beginning to cover her body like a frozen shroud. A soft whimper broke through her haze of pain and exhaustion. Alara's eyes snapped open. Had she imagined it? But no, there it was again, faint, but unmistakable. She pushed herself up on trembling arms, squinting through the curtain of falling snow. At first, she saw nothing but white. Then, a small dark shape materialized against the snow, barely visible in the fading light. A pup. Small, black, and clearly wounded. It lay half buried in the snow, its tiny body shaking violently. Something stirred in Alara's chest, an emotion she thought had died when Alpha Corvin pronounced her sentence. Compassion. Purpose. "Hold on, little one," she whispered, crawling toward the pup. "I've got you." The pup's fur was matted with blood, a deep gash running along its flank. It snapped weakly at her when she reached for it, fear evident in its golden eyes. "I won't hurt you," she said softly. "I promise." With gentle hands, she lifted the pup from the snow, cradling it against her chest. It was barely more than skin and bones, its heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. But there was a fierceness in those golden eyes, a will to live that matched her own. Alara removed her only cloak, threadbare but better than nothing, and wrapped it around the trembling creature. "We're going to die out here if we don't find shelter," she told the pup, as if it could understand. "So I guess we'd better not die, huh?" With renewed determination, Alara forced herself to her feet. The pup nestled against her, its small body warming slightly within the folds of the cloak. She staggered forward, peering through the thickening snowfall for any sign of shelter. There, almost hidden among the trees, the dark outline of what appeared to be a small cave. Alara changed course, pushing her exhausted body toward the potential sanctuary. The cave was shallow but dry, sheltered from the worst of the wind. Alara collapsed inside, still clutching the pup to her chest. With shaking hands, She gathered what few dry sticks she could find near the entrance and pulled a small flint from her pocket, one of the few possessions they hadn't taken from her when they cast her out. The fire was small, barely enough to light the cave, but it was heat, precious heat. Ilara carefully unwrapped the pup, examining its wound in the flickering light. The gash was deep, the edges jagged as if made by a hunter's trap. Without herbs or proper bandages, there was little she could do except clean it with snow. "This will hurt," she warned the pup, scooping a handful of clean snow from the cave entrance. The pup whimpered as she gently packed the wound with snow, but didn't bite or struggle. When she finished, she rewrapped it in her cloak and held it close. "I don't have much to offer you," she whispered, stroking its small head, "but we can be alone together, at least for tonight." The pup looked up at her with those strange golden eyes, so intelligent they almost seemed human, and licked her hand once before settling against her chest. Outside, the storm intensified, but inside the cave, Ilara felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not for herself. She knew her fate was likely sealed, but maybe she could save this pup. Maybe her final act could be one of mercy rather than the weakness Alpha Corvin had accused her of. The memory of the Alpha's face came unbidden, harsh, unforgiving as he delivered her sentence. "Betrayal cannot be tolerated," he had said, his voice cutting through the hushed clearing where the entire pack had gathered to witness her punishment. "You allowed human hunters onto our territory. 2 packmates died because of your foolish compassion." "I didn't know they were hunters," she had pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "They were children, lost in the snow. I was trying to lead them back to the human village." Silence. His roar had silenced not just her, but the murmurs of the assembled pack. "Your weakness endangers us all. You are no longer pack. You are outcast. If you return, you will be killed on sight." The ceremonial claw, sharp and cruel, had cut deep into her side, marking her forever as exile. No pack would take in a wolf who bore that scar. Ilara pushed the memory away, focusing instead on the small creature in her arms. The pup had fallen asleep, its breathing steadier now. She studied its face in the dying firelight. There was something strange about this pup, something she couldn't quite place. Its features seemed almost regal. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. Exhaustion and hunger were making her imagination run wild. It was just a wolf pup, lost like her, wounded like her. Perhaps they had been meant to find each other, to share whatever time they had left. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered, leaning back against the cold stone of the cave wall. "Tomorrow will be better." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they might be a lie. Tomorrow would bring more cold, more hunger. The storm might end, but winter had only just begun in the northern territories. Without a pack, without resources, survival seemed a distant hope at best. Still, as she drifted into uneasy sleep, the warm weight of the pup against her chest felt right somehow. If she was going to die, at least she wouldn't die completely alone. Ilara dreamed of running, not in fear, but in joy, of a forest bathed in moonlight, of strength flowing through her limbs. In the dream, she was whole again, strong again, and beside her ran a massive black wolf with golden eyes that seemed to hold the light of the moon itself. She woke to sunlight filtering through the cave entrance, and the strange sensation of being watched. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed, pristine, silent, deadly in its beauty. But it wasn't the changed landscape that made Ilara's breath catch in her throat. The pup was gone. In its place, seated at the mouth of the cave, was a man, tall, powerful, with midnight black hair and eyes the color of burnished gold. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, stark against his pale skin. He wore only a pair of dark trousers, his broad chest bare despite the bitter cold, and wrapped around his shoulders was her cloak, the same one she had used to warm the wounded pup. But it was his scent that made her heart stutter in her chest, a scent she knew all too well. Alpha Corvin, the man who had cast her out to die. Their eyes met, and for one frozen moment, neither moved. Then Ilara scrambled backward, pressing herself against the far wall of the cave. Her hand instinctively went to her side, to the wound he had given her. "You're afraid," he said, his deep voice filling the small space. It wasn't a question. "You exiled me," she replied, forcing steel into her voice despite her fear. You said I would be killed if I was found on Pack territory. We're beyond Pack territory, he said, his golden eyes never leaving her face. And I'm not here to kill you. Then why are you here? Corvin looked down at his hands, broad and strong, hands that had delivered her sentence, that had held the ceremonial claw that marked her. When he looked back up, there was something in his eyes she had never seen before. You saved me, he said quietly, when I didn't deserve saving. Elara stared at him, confusion replacing fear. I saved a pup, she said slowly. A wounded wolf pup. Corvin's lips curved in a humorless smile. That pup was me. That's impossible, Elara whispered, though even as the words left her lips, pieces began falling into place. The pup's unusual golden eyes, the strange regal quality to its features, the fact that it had vanished, replaced by the Alpha himself. You can't be a shifter? Corvin finished, his expression unreadable. No, not exactly. What I am is complicated. He shifted slightly, and Elara noticed the wound on his side, in exactly the same place the pup had been injured. It looked better than it had last night, but was still an angry red gash against his pale skin. A curse, he continued, voice low, laid upon me by a witch whose territory I claimed 5 years ago. During the full moon, when other shifters are at their strongest, I am forced into the form of a helpless pup. His jaw tightened. Last night, I was caught in one of the traps the human hunters set before you. Intervened. Elara's mind reeled with this information. Alpha Corvin, the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories, reduced to a vulnerable pup once a month. If his enemies ever discovered this weakness. Who else knows? She asked. Only my closest advisors. And now you. His golden gaze pierced her, which puts me in a difficult position. Fear shot through Elara again. Of course. She knew his secret now. A secret that could destroy him if revealed. I won't tell anyone, she said quickly. I swear it. Just let me go. I'll leave your territories completely. Head south, perhaps. You misunderstand. Corvin interrupted, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. He was even more imposing standing, his broad shoulders blocking much of the light from the cave entrance. I'm not here to silence you. I'm here to offer you a choice. He took a step toward her, and despite herself, Elara pressed further back against the cave wall. You could have left me to die last night, he continued. Given what I did to you, no one would have blamed you. Instead, you sheltered me, cleaned my wound, shared your warmth. His voice dropped. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why had she helped the pup? The answer seemed so simple, yet so difficult to explain to someone like Corvin, a leader known for his ruthlessness, his unwavering dedication to the pack's strength above all else. Because it needed help, she finally said. Because I couldn't just watch it suffer, even if that meant risking my own survival. She met his gaze steadily. The same reason I helped those human children, even though it cost me everything. Something flickered in Corvin's golden eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. Return with me to the pack, he said abruptly. Elara stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Return with me, he repeated. Not as an exile, but under my personal protection. Why would you want me back? You made it very clear that my weakness endangers the pack. Corvin's expression darkened. Things have changed since your exile. The hunters you encountered weren't just passing through our territory. They've established camps along our borders, venturing deeper each day. His hands clenched into fists. 3 more packmates have been killed in the last week alone. Horror washed over Elara. I'm sorry, she said softly, but I don't understand what this has to do with me. You understand humans in a way none of us do, Corvin explained. You've studied their ways, their languages. You even lived among them for a time during your training as a healer. He took another step closer. I need that knowledge. The pack needs it. Elara's heart raced. Return to the pack? After everything that had happened? After the shame of exile? The pain of the ceremonial claw? She looked down at her hands, remembering how they had trembled as she'd been forced to kneel before the entire pack, acknowledging her banishment. They won't accept me, she said. Not after you declared me outcast. They'll accept what I command, Corvin replied, a hint of his alpha authority coloring his tone. And when the full moon comes again? When you're transformed? Elara challenged. What then? Who will protect your secret when you're vulnerable? A muscle jumped in Corvin's jaw. That's the second part of what I'm offering. During the full moon, you would guard me, keep my secret, ensure my survival until dawn. The realization of what he was asking, the level of trust it would require, left Alara speechless. This man who had cast her out, who had nearly been the death of her, was now asking her to become the guardian of his greatest vulnerability. In exchange, he continued into her silence, your exile would be lifted, your position as pack healer restored. And he hesitated for the first time. I would publicly acknowledge my error in your sentencing. Alara's eyes widened. For an alpha to admit a mistake, especially one made in front of the entire pack, it was unprecedented. You don't have to decide immediately, Corvin said, misinterpreting her silence for hesitation. But we should leave this place. It's not safe. The storm has passed, and hunters may return to check their traps. As if to punctuate his words, a distant sound reached them, the faint but unmistakable barking of dogs. Human hunters, tracking through the fresh snow. Panic flashed across Corvin's face. So briefly, Alara almost missed it. The wound in his side was still serious. He wouldn't be able to fight or run at full strength. They're following my trail, he said grimly. From when I was in pup form, the blood. Alara made her decision in that moment. Not out of fear, not out of self-preservation, but because despite everything, she couldn't stand by and watch anyone suffer. Not even the man who had caused her so much pain. We need to move, she said, rising to her feet. Now, relief crossed Corvin's features, but he shook his head. The snow is deep. They'll track us easily. Alara's mind raced. Not if they think their quarry is dead. She pointed to his wound. I need some of your blood. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He pressed his hand against his injury, then offered it to her, palm slick with red. Alara took his hand and led him outside. The world was blindingly white, the snow untouched except for a trail of disturbed snow and droplets of blood leading to the cave, Corvin's trail from the night before. Working quickly, she smeared his blood in a widening pattern, creating the appearance of a violent struggle. Then she dragged a fallen branch through the snow, obscuring their actual escape route. They'll think wolves got to you first, she explained, voice low. The blood pattern suggests a kill and drag away. By the time they realize there's no actual body, our trail will be covered. Corvin watched her work with something like admiration. You've done this before. I lived among humans for 3 years, she reminded him. I learned how they hunt, how they track. She glanced up at the brightening sky. We need to go. Head north. The stream is only 1/2 mile from here. The water will hide our scent. They moved through the forest with the silent efficiency of wolves, though both remained in human form. Alara's exile mark burned with each step, a constant reminder of everything that had transpired between them. Yet here they were, working together, trusting each other out of necessity. The barking grew louder, then fainter as they reached the stream and waded into the icy water. Alara gasped at the cold, but kept moving, leading them downstream for nearly a 1/4 mile before finally climbing out on the opposite bank. Only when they had put significant distance between themselves and the hunters did they stop to rest. Alara sank down against a tree, her strength finally giving out. Without food for days, having given her cloak to warm Corvin in his pup form, she was reaching the limits of her endurance. Corvin noticed immediately. You're exhausted, he observed, crouching beside her. I'll be fine, she said, though her vision was beginning to blur at the edges. Just need to rest a moment. Corvin studied her face, and for the first time, she saw something like guilt in his expression. When was the last time you ate? Before my exile, she admitted. 3 days ago. Without a word, Corvin stood and disappeared into the trees. Alara leaned her head back against the rough bark, too tired to wonder where he had gone, or if he would return. Minutes passed, or perhaps longer. Time seemed to slip away as exhaustion claimed her. She was startled back to awareness by the sound of approaching footsteps. Corvin emerged from the trees, carrying a snow hare in one hand. Fresh blood stained his fingers. Eat, he said, offering her the hare. You need your strength. Alara stared at the offering, then up at Corvin's face. The great alpha had hunted for her, a task usually beneath his station. In pack hierarchy, alphas ate first, taking the choicest portions. They didn't provide food for others, especially not for disgraced exiles. Thank you, she said, accepting the hair with trembling hands. They built a small, nearly smokeless fire, and Alara roasted the meat. The scent made her stomach clench painfully, reminding her just how hungry she was. When the meat was done, she divided it, offering half to Corvin. He shook his head. "It's yours. All of it. You need to heal," she insisted, pushing his portion toward him. "And I can't eat all of this after starving for days. My stomach wouldn't handle it." After a moment's hesitation, he accepted. They ate in silence, the gravity of their situation hanging between them. Alara couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had changed. Yesterday she had been alone, dying slowly in the snow. Today she was sharing a meal with the very alpha who had cast her out. "Why did you really help those human children?" Corvin asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "You knew the risks, knew the pack's laws against interacting with humans." Alara looked into the small fire, memories washing over her. They were 7, maybe 8 years old, brother and sister. They had wandered too far from their village, gotten lost in the storm. She wrapped her arms around herself. They were terrified, freezing. The boy had already lost feeling in his fingers, early stages of frostbite. Another hour, and they would have died. "So you revealed yourself to them?" "No," she shook her head. "I approached them in human form, told them I knew the way back to their village. I was careful, Corvin. I never shifted, never revealed what I was." "Then how did the hunters find our territory?" Alara's hands clenched. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "I led the children to the edge of the village and watched them return safely to their parents. That should have been the end of it. But 3 days later, hunters appeared at our borders," Corvin finished, "with traps and silver-tipped arrows, specifically designed to hunt our kind. I swear to you, I revealed nothing," Alara said fiercely. "There must have been someone else. Another wolf, perhaps, or someone in the pack betrayed us," Corvin interrupted, his golden eyes intent on her face. Alara stared at him, the implication clear. "You think someone else led the hunters to us? Someone who wanted me blamed for it?" "I don't know," Corvin admitted, "but I intend to find out, which is another reason I need you to return." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Someone wanted you gone, Alara. I need to know why." The revelation sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the winter air. If Corvin was right, if someone in the pack had deliberately engineered her exile, then returning could be walking into a trap. "Who stands to gain from my exile?" she asked, mind racing through the pack's hierarchy. As the pack healer, she had held a respected position, but not one that carried particular power or influence. "That's what we need to discover," Corvin said. He hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. Something that happened after you were gone." The gravity in his tone made Alara's heart sink. "What is it?" "Your apprentice, Lena. She's missing." Alara felt as though the ground had dropped out from beneath her. "Missing? For how long?" 2 days after your exile, she went into the forest to gather herbs. She never returned." Corvin's expression darkened. "We found her collection basket, but no sign of a struggle. No blood. No scent trail leading away from the spot. She simply vanished." Lena. Bright, gentle Lena, who had followed Alara like a shadow, eager to learn the healing arts. Just 16, barely more than a child herself. "You think her disappearance is connected to my exile?" Alara said, the pieces beginning to align in her mind. Corvin nodded grimly. "I think someone is systematically removing the pack's healers. First you, then Lena. But why? That's what I need you to help me discover." Corvin's golden eyes reflected the flickering firelight. "So I ask you again, Alara, will you return with me to the pack? Not just for my protection during the full moon, but to help me uncover this betrayal before more packmates are lost?" Alara looked into the Alpha's face, the face that had haunted her dreams and nightmares for the past 3 days. She saw determination there, and something else, a vulnerability she had never associated with the powerful leader. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll return. For Lena. For the pack." She met his gaze steadily. "But not for you." Corvin accepted her terms with a solemn nod. "We'll leave at dawn tomorrow. You should rest." He stood, adding more wood to their small fire. "I'll keep watch." As Alara settled back against the tree, exhaustion claiming her once more, she couldn't help but wonder if she had just made a terrible mistake. She was agreeing to return to a pack that had cast her out, to people who had stood silent while she was branded and banished. and she would be doing so at the side of the very Alpha who had sentenced her. Yet as sleep claimed her last conscious thought was of Lena's bright smile, of the young girl's unwavering faith in her mentor. If there was even a chance of finding her, of bringing her home safely, Alara had to try, no matter what it might cost her. Dawn broke with a crystalline clarity that turned the forest into a wonderland of ice and light. Alara woke to find Corvin already alert, scanning the surrounding woods with predatory intensity. The fire had burned down to embers, leaving little trace of their presence. "No sign of the hunters," he reported, sensing her wakefulness without turning. "But we should move quickly. The pack territory is still half a day's journey from here." Alara rose stiffly, her body protesting after days of harsh treatment. The meal from the previous night had restored some of her strength, but she was still far from recovered. Without her cloak, still wrapped around Corvin's shoulders, the morning cold bit through her tattered clothes. Noticing her shiver, Corvin frowned. Then, in a gesture that surprised her, he removed the cloak and held it out to her. "Take it," he said. "You need it more than I do." "I'm fine," she replied automatically. "Your lips are blue, Alara." His tone brooked no argument. "Take the cloak. I can maintain my body heat better than you can right now." Reluctantly, she accepted, wrapping the worn fabric around her shoulders. It smelled of him now, that distinctive alpha scent of pine and winter wind, and something uniquely Corvin. It was disconcerting, but she couldn't deny the warmth it provided. They set off through the snow-laden forest, Corvin leading the way with confident steps. Despite his injury, he moved with fluid grace, his bare chest seemingly impervious to the cold. Alara followed, conserving her strength, watching the Alpha with new eyes. She had always feared him, of course. All the pack did to some degree. Corvin had taken control 5 years ago after the death of the previous Alpha, his uncle, and had ruled with an iron will ever since. He was fair, but harsh, demanding absolute loyalty and strength from every pack member. Yet now she had seen him vulnerable, had held him, small and wounded, in her arms, had cleaned his wounds and shared her warmth. The dichotomy was difficult to reconcile. "You're staring," Corvin observed, without looking back. Alara flushed, embarrassed at being caught. "I was just thinking about how different you seem now, compared to the Alpha who exiled me 3 days ago." Corvin was silent for so long that Alara thought he might not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. 3 days ago, I believed I was protecting the pack by removing a potential threat." He glanced back at her, golden eyes unreadable. "Now I'm not certain who the real threat is." The admission hung between them as they continued their journey. By midday, the landscape began to change subtly, the trees growing more familiar, the terrain rising as they approached the foothills where the pack made their home. As they neared pack territory, Corvin stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "When we arrive, there will be questions, challenges." Alara nodded, her stomach tightening with anxiety. "I know. Stay close to me," he instructed. "Don't engage with anyone until I've formally rescinded your exile. Even then, be cautious. If someone in the pack did betray us, they won't be happy to see you return." "And what about the curse?" she asked quietly. "When will you tell the pack about that?" A shadow crossed Corvin's face. "I won't," he said flatly. "That information remains between us and my most trusted advisors. To the rest, you're returning because I need your knowledge of humans to combat the hunter threat. Nothing more." Before Alara could respond, a howl cut through the crisp winter air. The pack's boundary patrol, alerting others to their approach. Corvin straightened, his posture shifting subtly as he reassumed the mantle of Alpha. "Ready?" he asked, his voice containing a hint of gentleness she'd never heard before. Alara took a deep breath, steeling herself. "As I'll ever be." Together, they crossed the invisible boundary that marked the beginning of pack territory, the land that had been Alara's home for most of her life, the land from which she had been brutally cast out just 3 days ago. And now, against all odds, she was returning, at the side of the very Alpha who had exiled her. The pack's central settlement rose from the snow-covered valley like an ancient fortress. Stone and timber structures clustered around the largest building, the pack house where Corvin resided, and where pack meetings were held. Smoke curled from chimneys, carrying the comforting scent of hearth fires and cooking meals. As Alara and Corvin approached, wolves emerged from their homes, eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd, and Alara fought the urge to shrink back from their stares. Some faces showed outright hostility, others curiosity, and a few, a precious few, reflected relief at seeing her alive. A tall, broad-shouldered man with silver-streaked hair pushed through the crowd. Malik, Corvin's beta and second-in-command. His weathered face betrayed nothing as he approached, though his eyes widened slightly at the sight of Corvin's wound. "Alpha," he greeted, bowing his head before shooting a questioning glance at Alara. "You've returned with unexpected company. Call the pack to assembly," Corvin commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "Immediately." Malik hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He turned and issued a series of sharp, barking orders that sent wolves scurrying to spread the word. Within minutes, the entire pack had gathered in the central clearing, forming a circle around Alara and Corvin, the same circle where Alara had been sentenced to exile 3 days earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on her, nor on the watching pack. Tension thickened the air as Corvin stepped forward, his golden eyes sweeping over the assembled wolves. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the clearing. 3 days ago, I passed judgment on Alara, former pack healer, for endangering our territory by aiding human children. He paused, his gaze steady. That judgment was made in error. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Alphas did not admit mistakes. Alphas did not retract judgments. The very foundation of pack hierarchy depended on the unwavering nature of alpha authority. "New information has come to light," Corvin continued, unperturbed by the shocked reactions. "Alara did not betray our pack to the hunters. Someone else did. Someone who remains among us." Murmurs erupted, wolves turning to each other with suspicious glances. Alara scanned the crowd, searching for reactions that seemed out of place. Most appeared genuinely shocked or confused, but a few faces stood out, like that of Torin, the pack's weapons master, whose expression remained carefully neutral, or Vessa, an elder female whose lips had thinned into a tight line of disapproval. "Ilara's exile is hereby rescinded," Corvin declared. "She returns to us with her full status as pack healer restored, and with my personal protection." His golden gaze hardened as it swept over the assembly once more. "Any action against her will be considered an action against me. Is that understood?" The traditional response would have been immediate agreement. But now, silence hung heavy in the clearing. Alara felt the weight of 100 stares, the judgment and doubt pressing against her skin. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice called out, "By what authority do you overturn pack law, Alpha?" The wolves parted to reveal Garrick, the pack's oldest elder. His stooped frame belied the sharp intelligence in his roomy eyes as he stepped forward, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff. "The same authority by which I pronounced her sentence," Corvin replied evenly. "Pack law states that once exile is declared, it cannot be undone." Garrick persisted. "The mark has been given." He pointed a trembling finger at Alara's side, where the ceremonial wound still throbbed beneath her tattered clothing. "Pack law serves the pack," Corvin countered. "When it fails to do so, it must be re-examined." He turned to face the elder fully. "Would you have us cling to a mistake out of pride, when our very survival is at stake?" Garrick's eyes narrowed. "What does her return have to do with our survival?" "The hunters who breached our territory were not random humans," Corvin explained, addressing the entire pack now. "They came prepared specifically to hunt our kind, with silver weapons and knowledge of shifter weaknesses. 3 more of our packmates have died since Alara's exile." Grief rippled through the assembly at the reminder of their recent losses. Alara's heart ached for them, for the families now mourning loved ones who would never return. "Alara lived among humans for 3 years," Corvin continued. "She understands their ways, their weapons, their strategies. We need that knowledge now more than ever." "And the girl? The apprentice?" A female voice cut through the murmurs. Nessa, Lena's mother, stepped forward. Her face was hollow with grief, dark circles smudged beneath her eyes. "Will her return bring my daughter back?" Alara's throat tightened. "I will do everything in my power to find Lena," she promised, speaking for the first time since their arrival. "She is as much my family as she is yours." Nessa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded once before stepping back into the crowd. "The assembly is concluded," Corvin declared. "Alara will resume her duties as healer immediately. Malik, call the council to meet in 1 hour. We have much to discuss." As the pack dispersed, many casting lingering glances back at Alara, Corvin turned to her. "Come," he said quietly. "We should see to your wound before the council meeting." He led her to the healer's cottage. Her cottage, though it felt strange to think of it that way after believing she would never see it again. The familiar scent of dried herbs and clean linen washed over her as they entered, bringing an unexpected sting of tears to her eyes. Home. Despite everything, this place still felt like home. The cottage appeared untouched since her departure, dusty but otherwise intact. Her books, her healing supplies, even the half-finished tea still sitting on the table, all exactly as she had left them. It was as if the pack had been waiting for her return, despite the permanence of her sentence. "No one has been in here since you left," Corvin explained, noting her surprise. "I ordered it sealed until—" He trailed off. "Until what?" Alara prompted. "Until we found Lena," he admitted. "I thought perhaps she might return and need the supplies." Alara moved through the space, running her fingers over familiar objects. "But you didn't expect me to return?" "No," Corvin said honestly. "I didn't." The admission hung between them as Alara gathered what she needed to treat both their wounds. Herbs for infection, clean bandages, salves she had prepared months ago, but which were still potent. The familiar routine of healing work steadied her, gave her something concrete to focus on beyond the overwhelming events of the past days. "Sit," she instructed, gesturing to a wooden chair. "I'll see to your side first." To her surprise, Corvin complied without argument, lowering himself onto the chair with a barely perceptible wince. The wound on his side had begun to heal with a shifter's natural regeneration, but it was still angry and raw. As Alara cleaned the injury, her fingers working with practiced efficiency, she felt Corvin watching her face. "Why did you agree to return?" he asked suddenly. "After what I did to you." Alara's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "I told you. For Lena. For the pack. Not for me." He repeated her words from the forest. A statement, not a question. "No," she confirmed, applying a healing salve to the wound. "Not for you." Corvin was silent as she finished bandaging his side. When she stepped back, he caught her wrist gently. "And yet you saved me in the snow. Shared your warmth, your food, your cloak." Alara met his golden eyes steadily. "That was for the pup, not for the alpha who cast me out. And if they are one and the same?" The question lingered between them, challenging her carefully constructed division between the vulnerable pup she had rescued and the powerful alpha who had sentenced her to die alone in the wilderness. Before she could formulate a response, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Malik entered without waiting for permission, his expression grave. "Alpha, there's been another attack. Northern border. 1 dead, 2 wounded." Corvin was on his feet instantly, all traces of vulnerability vanishing beneath the mask of alpha authority. "Hunters?" "Yes," Malik confirmed grimly. "Same tactics as before. Silver traps, wolfsbane-tipped arrows." He glanced at Alara. "One of the wounded was asking for the healer." "I'll come immediately," Alara said, already gathering supplies into her healer's bag. Whatever complex emotions swirled between her and Corvin, the needs of the wounded came first. "The council meeting will have to wait," Corvin decided. "Malik, organize a patrol to secure the area. Make sure the hunters have withdrawn." "Already done," the beta replied. "And Alpha," he hesitated briefly. "There's something else. Something left at the attack site. A message." "What kind of message?" Corvin asked sharply. "A silver arrow," Malik said, pinning a note to a tree. It said, "Return what was taken." Corvin's expression darkened. "Return what? We've taken nothing from these humans." An image flashed in Alara's mind, of 2 small children, lost in the snow. "The children," she said suddenly. "The ones I helped. Could they have seen something? Or taken something, perhaps?" "Possible," Corvin acknowledged, "though it still doesn't explain how the hunters knew exactly where to find our pack." "Unless someone told them," Alara said, voicing the suspicion that had been growing since their conversation in the forest. "Someone inside the pack. The same someone who wanted me gone." The 3 exchanged grim looks, the implications hanging heavy in the air. If Alara was right, if there was a traitor in their midst, then no one was truly safe. "We'll discuss this later," Corvin decided. "For now, the wounded need attention." Alara followed Malik out of the cottage, acutely aware of the stares that followed her as they crossed the settlement. Word of her return had spread quickly, along with the unprecedented news that the Alpha had reversed an exile sentence. The pack's reaction seemed mixed, some openly hostile, others cautiously accepting, most simply confused. At the pack's infirmary, Alara found 2 badly injured wolves, Thomas, a young guard barely out of adolescence, and Kira, an experienced hunter. Both had been caught in silver-laced traps, their wounds festering with the burn of toxic metal. Alara worked tirelessly for hours, cleaning the poisoned injuries, applying healing poultices, singing soft healing chants that her grandmother had taught her long ago. By the time she finished, night had fallen, and exhaustion pulled at her limbs. "You should rest," Corvin's voice came from the doorway. He had been in and out of the infirmary throughout the day, checking on the injured and consulting with his guards. "I will," she promised, washing blood from her hands in a basin, "after I check on them once more." "You've done all you can for now," he insisted, stepping closer. "You're still recovering yourself. You need sleep." Alara sighed, recognizing the truth in his words. Her own wound throbbed dully, and the days without proper food or rest were catching up with her. "Where am I to sleep?" she asked. "My cottage has been prepared for you," Corvin finished. "Fresh linens, a hot meal waiting. I've posted guards outside as well, just in case." In case the traitor decided to eliminate her permanently, Alara understood. The thought should have terrified her, but she was too exhausted to feel much beyond a dull acceptance of the danger. Corvin escorted her back to the cottage, his powerful presence keeping curious onlookers at a distance. As they walked, Alara found herself studying his profile in the moonlight. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the ever-present intensity in his golden eyes. How had she never noticed the shadows beneath those eyes, the weight of responsibility etched into the lines of his face? "You should rest as well," she found herself saying as they reached her door. "Your wound needs time to heal properly." A faint smile touched his lips. "Are you concerned for my well-being, healer?" "I'm concerned for all my patients," she replied evenly, though something in his tone made her heartbeat quicken. Corvin studied her face for a moment. "The full moon comes in 3 days," he said quietly. "We should discuss arrangements." The reminder of his curse, and her promise to protect him during his vulnerable transformation, sobered her immediately. "Yes, tomorrow, perhaps." He nodded. "Tomorrow." Then, with surprising gentleness, he added, "Sleep well, Alara." As she watched him walk away, broad shoulders silhouetted against the night sky, Alara couldn't help but wonder at how drastically her life had changed in the span of just 4 days. From pack healer to exile to, what, exactly? Guardian of the Alpha's darkest secret? Potential target of an unknown traitor? Returned outcast walking a precarious line between acceptance and rejection? Inside her cottage, she found everything as Corvin had promised. Clean linens on her bed, a hot meal waiting by the hearth, a fire burning cheerfully in the grate. But as she sat down to eat, her gaze fell on Lena's small workspace in the corner, the neat arrangement of tools the apprentice had so carefully maintained, the half-finished project of categorizing herbs still spread across the table. "I'll find you," Alara whispered to the empty space. "I promise." That night, her dreams were troubled, a chaotic mixture of memories and fears. She was back in the snow, dying alone and cold. She was holding the small black pup, trying to keep it warm as hunters closed in around them. She was standing before the pack as Corvin pronounced her sentence, the ceremonial claw cutting deep into her side. But in this dream, when she looked up into Corvin's face as he delivered her exile, his golden eyes weren't cold and unforgiving. They were filled with something else entirely, something that looked remarkably like regret. Morning came with a gentle knock at her door. Alara woke instantly, the wariness of an exile still fresh in her reflexes. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door to find a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, standing on her doorstep with a covered basket. "Alpha Corvin asked me to bring you breakfast," the girl said, offering the basket with a shy smile, "and to tell you the council is meeting at midday." "Thank you," Alara replied, touched by the unexpected kindness. She recognized the girl as Mira, daughter of one of the pack hunters. "How is your mother's shoulder?" she asked, remembering treating the woman for a dislocation months ago. Mira's eyes widened in surprise that Alara remembered. "Much better. She can hunt again now." "I'm glad to hear it." As Mira turned to leave, she hesitated, then blurted out, "I'm glad you're back. Lena is my friend." She always said you were the best healer the pack has ever had." Before Alara could respond, the girl darted away, leaving her standing in the doorway with the basket of food and an unexpected warmth in her chest. Perhaps not everyone in the pack resented her return. After eating, the simple bread and cheese tasting like a feast after days of hunger, Alara set about restoring order to her cottage. She cleaned, organized her supplies, and carefully examined everything for signs of disturbance that might indicate someone had searched the place during her absence. But everything appeared untouched, preserved exactly as she had left it. As midday approached, she changed into clean clothes left by one of the pack women, grateful to be rid of the tattered garments she'd worn since her exile. The new dress was simple but warm, with long sleeves that covered the still-healing exile mark on her side. Alara was braiding her hair when another knock came at her door. This time, it was Malik who stood outside, his weathered face solemn. "The council is gathering," he informed her. "Alpha Corvin requests your presence." As they walked toward the pack house, Alara asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. How many know about his condition? Malik glanced at her, his expression carefully neutral. "Only 3. Myself, Nara the seer, and Vorin, his personal guard. And now me," Alara added. "And now you," Malik agreed. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "It has not been easy for him." Alara could imagine. An alpha forced into complete vulnerability once every month, dependent on a handful of trusted individuals to protect not just his life, but the secret that could destroy his authority if revealed. The irony that Corvin, who valued strength and self-reliance above all else, should be cursed with such periodic helplessness was not lost on her. The council chamber was warm and dimly lit, dominated by a massive round table carved from a single ancient tree. Around it sat the pack's leadership, Garrick and 2 other elders, the heads of the warrior and hunter divisions, and Nara the seer, a blind woman whose clouded eyes seemed to see more than most. Corvin sat at the head of the table, his golden eyes finding Alara immediately as she entered. He gestured to an empty seat at his right hand, a position of honor that caused more than one surprised look among the council members. "Now that we are all present," Corvin began once Alara was seated, "we must address the immediate threats facing our pack. First, the human hunters who continue to breach our borders with increasing frequency and deadly intent, and who seem to possess knowledge they should not have," Garrick added pointedly, his rheumy eyes fixed on Alara. "If you have an accusation to make, Elder, speak it plainly." Corvin's voice carried a warning edge. Garrick's gaze didn't waver. "I find it convenient that the attacks began after she helped those human children, and now intensify upon her return. The timing suggests correlation, not causation," Malik countered smoothly. "And if you recall, the most recent attack occurred while Alara was in exile, far from our territory. Which brings us to our second concern," Corvin continued before Garrick could respond. "The possibility of a traitor within our pack, someone who deliberately led the hunters to us and arranged for Alara to take the blame." Tension thickened in the room, council members exchanging uneasy glances. "What evidence do you have of this?" asked Thora, head of the hunters. "The hunters knew exactly where to find our guard posts," Malik explained. "They knew our patrol schedules, our weakest points, information no outsider could possess. And there's Lena's disappearance," Alara added quietly. All eyes turned to her. Why would anyone take a 16-year-old apprentice healer, unless she saw something she shouldn't have, or knew something? Or unless someone wanted to eliminate all those with healing knowledge from our pack, Corvin finished, his golden eyes sweeping across the assembled council. First Alara, then Lena. But why target the healers? Doran, the warrior chief, asked with a frown. "They pose no threat." An answer formed in Alara's mind, so obvious she was surprised she hadn't seen it before. "Because healers can identify poisons," she said slowly. "We know the signs, the symptoms. If someone wanted to eliminate a specific target without raising suspicion." Her gaze drifted to Corvin, and a chill ran down her spine. What if the ultimate target was the Alpha himself? Not through direct confrontation. Few in the pack could hope to defeat Corvin in combat. But through more insidious means? The note left at the attack site. She continued, the pieces falling into place. "Return what was taken." What if that doesn't refer to something the children took, but to someone the pack took? She looked around the table. Has anyone new joined the pack recently? Someone from human territories, perhaps? The council members exchanged glances. Then Thora spoke. There was the traitor, 3 moons ago, the one who sold us the southern medicines. He stayed for nearly a month, Nara the seer added, her clouded eyes seeming to stare into the distance, longer than any traitor usually remains, and had access to our food, our water, Malik noted grimly. But he left before the attacks began, Doran pointed out. Perhaps he was merely gathering information, Corvin suggested, learning our weaknesses, our patrol patterns, information he could then sell to hunters. As the council continued to debate, Ilara's mind drifted back to Lena's disappearance. If the girl had indeed witnessed something, or suspected something, she would have documented it. Lena was meticulous in her record-keeping, a trait Ilara had both admired and occasionally teased her about. "I need to check something," she said suddenly, rising from her seat. "In Lena's quarters." Corvin nodded his permission. "Malik, go with her." Lena had lived in a small room attached to the healer's cottage, a space that was part bedroom, part study area. Like the main cottage, it appeared untouched since her disappearance. Bed neatly made, clothes hung carefully, books arranged precisely on the small shelf. But Ilara knew her apprentice too well to be fooled by the apparent orderliness. She went directly to the loose floorboard beneath the bed, where Lena kept her private journal. The board came up easily, revealing the small leather-bound book tucked into the hollow beneath. "She hid her writings?" Malik asked, watching as Ilara carefully opened the journal. "She valued her privacy," Ilara explained, flipping through the pages. "And she was observant, sometimes too observant for her own good." The journal was filled with Lena's neat handwriting, daily accounts of her training, personal reflections, observations about the pack. Ilara skimmed through the entries until she reached the last few days before her own exile. There, in an entry dated 3 days before the human children incident, was a passage that made her blood run cold. "Saw something strange today," Lena had written. "Torin meeting with a human at the boundary stone. They exchanged packages. Didn't look like normal trading. Torin seemed nervous, kept looking around. The human gave him a pouch that clinked like coins. I hid before they could see me, but I'm worried. Should I tell Ilara? Or Alpha Corvin directly?" The next entry, dated the following day, was even more disturbing. "I think Torin saw me yesterday. He's been watching me all day. Asked strange questions about healing plants, which ones cause sleep or paralysis. Said it was for arrow coatings, but it felt wrong. Going to tell Ilara tomorrow after she returns from gathering herbs." But tomorrow had never come for Lena, because tomorrow was the day Ilara had found the lost children, setting in motion the events that would lead to her exile. "Torin," Ilara breathed, looking up at Malik with wide eyes. "It's been Torin all along." Malik's expression hardened. "The weapons master, with access to silver, to Wolfsbane, to every warrior in the pack. And to Corvin's food and drink," Ilara added, a new fear gripping her heart. "If he's been planning this, working with human hunters, the Alpha is in danger." Malik finished grimly. "Come, we must return to the council immediately." But as they hurried from Lena's quarters, a howl split the air, the pack's alarm signal, warning of immediate danger. Moments later, the sounds of fighting erupted from the direction of the pack house. They ran toward the commotion, Ilara clutching Lena's journal to her chest. The scene that greeted them in the central clearing was chaos, pack members fighting each other, humans with silver weapons moving among them, and at the center of it all, Corvin locked in combat with Torin. The weapons master wielded a silver blade, forcing Corvin to dodge rather than parry directly. Even a scratch from the toxic metal could weaken a shifter significantly. Blood already stained the snow where Corvin had been caught by a glancing blow. "You fool!" Torin was shouting, his face contorted with rage. "You could have had it all. Power, territory, strength. The humans offered us an alliance. They offered enslavement," Corvin snarled back, evading another thrust of the silver blade. "They would use us as weapons, as hunting dogs, until they tired of us and destroyed us all." Malik immediately shifted into his wolf form, a massive gray beast, and leapt into the fray to aid his alpha. Ilara stood frozen, watching the battle unfold, acutely aware of her inability to shift. Without the strength and speed of her wolf form, she was vulnerable, especially against armed opponents. Yet she couldn't simply hide. Not when her alpha, her patient, was in danger. A familiar scent caught her attention, and she turned to see a small group of humans attempting to flank Corvin from behind. Silver arrows knocked in their bows. Among them was a face she recognized, the traitor who had stayed with the pack months ago. Without thinking, Alara shouted a warning. "Behind you!" Corvin spun just in time to avoid the first arrow, which embedded itself in the ground where he had been standing seconds before. With a roar of fury, he charged the humans, forcing them to scatter. In the momentary confusion, Torin saw his opportunity. He lunged forward, silver blade aimed directly at Corvin's unprotected back. "No!" Alara screamed, throwing herself forward. Time seemed to slow as she collided with Torin, knocking his aim off just enough that the blade sliced across Corvin's shoulder rather than piercing his heart. The weapons master snarled in rage, turning on Alara with deadly intent. "You should have stayed gone, healer," he growled, raising the silver blade once more. Alara scrambled backward, knowing she couldn't outrun or outfight the trained warrior. But before Torin could strike, a massive black form slammed into him from the side, sending him crashing into the snow. Corvin, partially shifted into a terrifying hybrid of man and wolf, stood over the weapons master, claws extended, golden eyes blazing with fury. With one swift movement, he tore the silver blade from Torin's grasp and flung it away. "For your betrayal of the pack," he growled, voice distorted by his partial shift. "The sentence is death." Torin's eyes widened in fear. "The humans promised us power," he gasped. "Protection from the curse. They know how to break it." His words ended in a gurgle as Corvin's claws tore through his throat. Around them, the battle was turning in the pack's favor. With Torin dead, the human hunters were losing their coordination, their inside knowledge. One by one, they fell or fled, until the clearing was still once more, the snow stained crimson with blood. Alara pushed herself to her feet, immediately moving to check on the wounded. As a healer, her duty remained clear even amidst chaos. She worked quickly, treating those with the most severe injuries first, paying special attention to wounds caused by silver weapons. When she finally made her way to Corvin, he had shifted back to human form, though his golden eyes still burned with the feral intensity of his wolf. The cut across his shoulder was deep, the edges already showing the telltale blackening of silver poisoning. "You need immediate treatment," she told him, examining the wound with professional detachment, despite the turmoil of emotions within her. "The silver is spreading quickly. Others need help more," he insisted, attempting to rise. Alara pushed him back down with surprising firmness. "You're no use to the pack dead, Alpha, and you will die if this poison reaches your heart." Something in her tone must have convinced him, for he allowed her to help him to the healer's cottage, where she immediately set to work cleaning and treating the wound. As she worked, Malik and the other council members arrived to report on the aftermath of the battle. 5 dead from our side, Malik reported grimly. 12 wounded, but all expected to recover. 3 humans captured. The rest fled or were killed. "The captives?" Corvin asked, wincing as Alara applied a poultice to his shoulder. "Being held securely. They'll be questioned once things settle." "And Torin's accomplices within the pack?" 2 identified so far, Malik replied. "Both warriors under his direct command. They've been detained." Alara listened to the exchange as she continued treating Corvin's wound. The revelation of Torin's betrayal explained so much: the hunter's knowledge of pack territories, her own exile, Lena's disappearance. But one question remained unanswered. Did the humans really know how to break the curse? She asked quietly, once Malik and the others had departed. Corvin's golden eyes met hers, pain and exhaustion evident in their depths. "I doubt it," he said, more likely a lie to secure Torin's cooperation. "But if there is a way," she began. "I've searched for 5 years," Corvin interrupted. "Consulted seers, wise women, even a human witch doctor once. If there is a cure, it remains hidden." Alara finished bandaging his shoulder in silence, her mind turning over the events of the past days. So much had changed in such a short time. The pack was wounded, but would heal. The immediate threat had been neutralized, yet the question of Lena's whereabouts remained, as did the reality of Corvin's curse, and her promise to guard him during the full moon. "Thank you," Corvin said suddenly, breaking the silence, "for the warning during the battle, and for intercepting Torin's attack. You saved my life." Alara met his gaze steadily. "I did what anyone would do for their Alpha." "No," he countered softly. "You did what someone does for someone they care about, despite everything that's happened between us." The words hung in the air between them, a truth neither had been ready to acknowledge until now. Despite the exile, despite the pain and betrayal, something had shifted between them, something that had perhaps begun that night in the snow, when she had sheltered a wounded pup without knowing its true identity. "Rest," she instructed, rising from his side. "The poultice will draw out the silver, but your body needs time to heal." Corvin caught her wrist as she turned to leave, his touch gentle despite the strength in his hand. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." And so she stayed, sitting beside him as evening fell, watching over him as he finally surrendered to exhaustion and fell into healing sleep. Outside, the pack began to rebuild, to heal, to come to terms with the betrayal they had suffered. Patrols were doubled, wounds were treated, the dead were prepared for burial rites. And through it all, Elara remained at her alpha's side, just as she had promised in the forest, not out of duty or obligation, but out of something deeper, a connection that had been forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. 3 days later, as the full moon rose over the snow-covered mountains, Elara sat beside a small black pup in a secluded clearing deep within pack territory. The transformation had been as painful as it was inevitable, Corvin's powerful form diminishing into the vulnerable shape of a wolf pup once more. But this time, as she wrapped him in a warm blanket and held him close, protecting him from the bitter cold of the winter night, there was no fear between them, no distrust, no anger, no lingering resentment. "We'll find Lena," she promised softly, stroking the pup's silky head, "and we'll break this curse. Together." The pup looked up at her with those familiar golden eyes, so full of intelligence and determination even in this form, and licked her hand once in agreement. As the moon climbed higher in the night sky, casting its silver light over the sleeping pack, Elara held her alpha close, guarding his vulnerability with her strength, just as he had once guarded the pack with his. The symmetry felt right somehow, a balance restored, a circle completed. For in the end, that was what pack truly meant. Not merely strength, not merely obedience to hierarchy and tradition, but protection, compassion, the willingness to see beyond appearances to the heart that beat beneath. The abandoned girl had rescued a pup from the snow, never knowing she was saving the very alpha who had cast her out. And when the moon rose, that alpha had begged for her forgiveness, not with words, but with actions that spoke far louder, with trust freely given, with vulnerability freely shown. And in that trust, in that vulnerability, they had found something neither had expected. They had found home. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.